Now, I'm not trying to make you guilty of my weaknesses and my sins, but are you a little bit like me? And if you've been with us while we've been going through Jude here, all of these characteristics of these what Jude, he identifies them as ungodly people who have slipped in among the true followers of Jesus, who deny the sovereign Lord Jesus Christ. And he goes on with an extensive list of horrible qualities and negatives. These sinful behaviors, disruptive, divisive, ungodly. I mean, and I'm going, lay it on them. Man, let them have it. Don't let up until he gets to verse 16. And this is essentially his summary of what he's thinking about and talking about with these sinful and ungodly people. He says, these people are grumblers and complainers. Wait. They're grumblers and complainers are not always ungodly. I don't know. I do know that if you go through the book of Psalms, and you're looking for the emotional temperature of the psalmist. Now, David didn't write all the Psalms. There were other authors as well. But when you read some of the Psalms, they are Psalms of complaint. One of the questions that David and the other psalmists seem to often ask God is, how long, O Lord? How long, God? And it may be the second part of that is, will you withhold your care or your blessing or your presence? How long? I mean, that's a little bit of a complaint. There are other times where David talks about his enemies surrounding him. They're like dogs waiting to tear him apart. I mean, that's a little bit of a complaint, and yet it's more of a realistic statement of where they are, what they're feeling. It's not an accusation against God. See, the problem is that when we complain against God, when we grumble against God, we've really lost view of who He is and who we are. If you do Facebook, you've probably seen it drifting around as a meme that says, hey, God is not obligated to explain to you everything He does. I totally agree. I know this about me. I know that even if He did explain everything He was doing in my life, there's a big part of it I wouldn't be able to grasp. I don't have a big enough context to understand what God is doing in my life in this moment in time against all of eternity. That's way too big of a context for me to be able to engage with. Okay, back to grumblers and complainers. Been in some churches that struggle with this, can I say? I know of churches that this is their number one characteristic. And whatever the name on their letterhead, on their Sunday bulletins on the side of their building, I think they ought to probably change it to grumblers and complainers. There are people who seem to have the spiritual gift of complaint. I had lunch the other day with a good friend of mine who's pastoring in a church where a minority of people are the noise, and not just the white noise. I'm talking the highly critical, highly accusative, even gossiping noise in his head. They don't want to change. They don't want to move forward. They don't like the way he does or doesn't. One of the difficulties that he's experiencing is the reality that he's never going to change their mind. They will never be satisfied. They have formed their identity around what they hate or don't like, and they don't even know the difference. Now, I'm that was kind of a grumble and a complaint against those folks. The truth is, we have to deal with the fact that we're broken, and to grumble and complain, they can be, depending on your temperament, they can be the first default. I don't want it to be in my life. I look at what Jude says of these ungodly people who deny the sovereign Lord Jesus Christ. I don't want to be in that group. I have a tendency to see the negative possibilities first. I've said this before lots of times, I like to think of myself as a realist, but my optimist friends think of me as a pessimist. I don't know. I do know that if I really am going to be a realist, I'm going to have to grab a hold of some of that optimism and include it in my view. Where are you? Do you find it a first default to complain and grumble? That's a penetrating question, and I'm not judging anybody. I'm not really even judging myself, but I am making an observation. And it comes down to this. I don't want to be a grumbler or a complainer. Here's the thing. Grumbling and complaining can be, often are, habits. A habit is a behavioral expression or a mental activity that we have taken on over time through repetition. Eventually, our habits, as much as anything, will describe our character. That is a tough indictment. And it is absolutely true in my experience and opinion. I can't get away from the fact that I want to weed out and get rid of my default tendencies toward grumbling and complaining. Well, I'm going to just refer to a book. I've mentioned it once, I think, before, but the book will do you way more good than me going on for another 5 or 10 minutes here about what do we do about this habit thing. Habits, the title of the book is Soundtracks by author John Acuff. I found it very interesting and very insightful. He talks about how we have broken soundtracks in our head. These are the messages that we picked up over time. For a lot of us, all our life that we were able to consciously connect dots. So this could be from age 3 and forward. We don't very well connect dots at age 3, but we try to. And if you're my age, that's that's more than 65 years of accumulating broken soundtracks. These messages that play over and over and over and over in our mind so often and so routinely that we don't even know we're hearing them sometimes. Let me say often. Anyway, what do you do about these soundtracks? Because these soundtracks will manifest in habits of thought and behavior. And Acuff has some really good ideas that I highly recommend, and a book to follow that with. And neither one of these books are what's the word I want to use, academic or psychobabble. They are I some of my favorite books have made me stretch in the way I think and my vocabulary and my my views. And yet some of my very favorite books are in the category that I call bottom shelf. One of my favorite guys is Gary Smalley, and one of the reasons I liked him is because all his teaching, his preaching, and his writing puts the cookies on the bottom shelf where even short guys like I am can reach them. Well, both of these books are that way. The other one is called Your Future Self Will Thank You, and it's a book about self-discipline and habit, and offers some terrific insight into how do we break bad habits and build good habits. The author's name is Dyck, D-Y-C-K. I'm hitting this thing about habit because so many of those of us in God's family have over time developed a habit of grumbling and complaining, that when we pull it out and set it in the light of day, we don't want that. But until we figure out how to forsake that and replace it with something of value, we will continue. I don't want to be a grumbler and a complainer. And he goes on, and holy cow, does this often describe the people in these churches I was talking about, only living to satisfy their desires. I want you to think about the church congregation that you attend. Most of us got connected with the church that was enough like us and met enough of our personal requirements and preferences that we could be comfortable and feel safe. A friend of mine says that church needs to be a safe place to make dangerous decisions. I agree. But if our preferences become so narrow and so binding that anything that shows up outside of that is displeasing to us, we're going to have problems. You're going to have problems in your church. Hey, you're going to have problems in your life. Has anybody ever had a job where there was nothing they didn't like about it? Now, I have a job that I like almost everything about it, but not everything. Has there ever been anyone in part of a family where there was nothing that didn't satisfy them or please them? There was nothing outside their boundaries of desire? No. There's no marriage that exists of that kind. Life is about learning to adjust and deal with things outside of our desires. Jude says these grumblers and complainers live only to satisfy their desires. Their most significant thing in their life is, what do I want? Ooh. It's a very dangerous place to live. It is a harsh thing for me to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. Hell will be populated by people who lived only to satisfy their desires. That's harsh. I'm not going to hell because I said yes to Jesus, but my journey of life, one of the big pieces of it is developing habits of thought and behavior that forsake living only to satisfy my desires. Where are you at on that? You don't have to be judgmental, but it'd be pretty wise to be observational. I'll see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.